Well, welcome to this issue of Discovering Truth at the Movies. Hi, my name is David Lance. And today, in this episode of the Chronicles of Belteshazzar, Daniel meets King Nebuchadnezzar. Not wishing to eat the Babylonian food that the Babylonians wish to serve him, Daniel proposes an alternative to their Babylonian trainer, Potiphar. Just as in the story of Pinocchio, Daniel was given a choice to let his conscience be his guide and to listen to the voice of God or not. Now, the Chronicles of Belteshazzar is sort of based on the concept of the movie The Princess Bride, where a grandfather comes to visit a sick grandson who is staying there at home and reads him of a story that comes alive with adventure and all sorts of things. So this book, The Chronicles of Belteshazzar, is intended for youths approximately ages 4th through 9th grade, about 10 to 15 years of age, as told by a grandfather to his grandsons who come to visit for the weekend. Now, I want to ask you to consider joining me as I read each chapter and provide commentary. I'll be reading one chapter at a time. I'll always have a question for reflection to discuss, and I'll post these episodes on, as far as the audio is concerned, on my podcast at Discovering Truth at the Movies. I hope to eventually publish this as a book. And so let us look at this chapter where Daniel meets Nebuchadnezzar. About 10 minutes later, the boys returned to the sunroom, having finished their break. Nine served fresh popcorn. With everyone settled back in their seats, Grandpa put his costume back on, turned to the next page of the Chronicles of Belteshazzar, and resumed his story. And so the lion of Babylon vanquished the bull at Carchemish. In that same year, he carried off to the land of Shinar the vessels of the temple of Solomon. To her gates, he brought not only the chosen ones of Zion, Nebuchadnezzar also brought captives of the other nations, including the Philistines from the city of Ashkelon. The days passed quickly in our new home in the land of Shinar. Their king, Nebuchadnezzar, took a special interest in the training of my friends and I. This is the tale of how I was chosen to become one of the wise men, a mage of Babylon. The Chronicles of Belteshazzar. Tell me, Potiphar, how have your Israelite pupils been doing? Asked King Nebuchadnezzar. Ever since returning from his battle against the Egyptians at Carchemish and bringing the captives of several conquered people back to Babylon, he had been too busy with the politics of his court to see what was happening with the training of his most promising exiles. In the 3 months that they have been in my charge, they have excelled, O king. I have invited several of them to join us this evening. They are sitting over there. Potiphar pointed to a group of Hebrews, among whom were Daniel and his friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Nebuchadnezzar looked in the direction of Potiphar, his servant in charge of training the Hebrews that he had indicated. They are not eating the drink and drinking. Why is that? Oh, my king, they have told us that their God forbids them to eat the food that we serve them. They do not seem to suffer for it, so I have not made an issue of it. Nebuchadnezzar scratched his beard for a moment and then drained his cup of wine. Nonsense. I want them trained in all our ways. All. They must be strong and healthy to do so. They must become like us. Henceforth, you shall require them to eat our food, or I will have your head. Is that understood? Yes, O king, beginning tomorrow, it shall be done. You heard Nebuchadnezzar. If you do not eat the food prepared by my people, I will lose my head, Potiphar said emphatically to the brash young man before him. Daniel and his 3 closest friends had known that their decision would not be easy, but Potiphar had to be made to understand that they could not compromise on this point. Potiphar, you have been kind to us, and just since the day that we arrived. Meshach, Shadrach, Abednego, and I have prospered under your instruction. The goal of both of us is that my friends and I be able to serve Babylon to the best of our abilities. Would you not agree with that? Potiphar looked at his pupil impatiently. Yes, of course. What is your point? We believe that we can best do this by eating the foods prescribed by our religion. You believe that Babylonian food is best for us. Therefore, let us test this. For the next 10 days, the four of us will eat only our kind of food, and all the other Israelite youths will eat the Babylonian food. If at the end of 10 days our appearance does not surpass that of the others, we will eat the Babylonian food. However, if our appearance surpasses that of the others, we will continue to eat our food. Agreed? Potiphar looked at Daniel, his brows furrowed. I don't know why, but I will do as you ask. For both our sakes, don't disappoint me. Most of Daniel's contemporaries ate pork, as well as meat sacrificed to the Babylonian idols. He was disgusted by his countrymen's willingness to compromise on their beliefs. Today was the day for Nebuchadnezzar to render his judgment. Without intending it, Daniel had made sure that he and his friends would come to the attention of the king of Babylon. Daniel, quit daydreaming and get a move on, Abednego said from the doorway of Daniel's room. We must assemble in the courtyard, and you're running late as usual. Daniel stood up and made sure his tunic and cloak were in proper order. You're always in a rush. Relax, Abednego, Daniel teased, grinning at his friend. He sauntered slowly over in Abednego's direction, and then, with a quick twist of his body, moved past him and out the door. And as he did so, Daniel called out, Come on, let's go, or we'll be late. They descended the stairs that led from the second floor balcony of their quarters into the enclosed courtyard below. Most of the other Hebrew pupils in Potiphar's charge were already there. A few other stragglers besides Daniel and Abednego came from other parts of the oval compound surrounding the courtyard. They fell into line and began to march toward the reviewing area. Their Babylonian masters awaited them, conferring among themselves. Thus it begins, Nebuchadnezzar said to Naaman and Haman on either side of him. Babylon will become a melting pot. We will train these different peoples who will then be ambassadors for us to their own people. No other empire in all history has attempted to do what we are doing. They have all made the fatal mistake of attempting to enslave the people they have conquered. In the end, the desire for freedom has led to the ultimate overthrow of the conqueror. Neither man, not knowing the thoughts of the other, wished to challenge Nebuchadnezzar on this point of philosophy. Instead, they turned their attention to Potiphar as he led his charges to assemble in front of them. Nebuchadnezzar walked down the steps of the review platform so that he could inspect the Hebrew youths. He spent several minutes walking among them until he came to Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He paused in front of them and eyed them closely. Potiphar, these four appear to be stronger and more healthy than the rest. He looked at the four of them. All but Daniel's eyes were averted, gazing at the dirt beneath their feet. To what do you attribute this? He asked, looking directly into Daniel's eyes. The moment of truth. Daniel had to choose between telling the truth or telling a lie. They were supposed to have been eating the Babylonian food. If Nebuchadnezzar found out that they hadn't, they were dead. Yet Daniel couldn't lie. Certainly, he spoke the words he had rehearsed for just this moment. Does my lord the king always seek to do the will of Marduk? Daniel asked. Yes, my duty is to serve the God of the earth. Why do you ask? Like you, I seek to serve my God, but I have also been taught to obey the orders of my king. How could I do both? Daniel asked. He watched the expression on Nebuchadnezzar's face change to a frown. Daniel spoke quickly. I convinced my friends that we should eat only the food ordered by our God for 10 days. After that time, if the food of our God caused us to find favor in your sight, we would have pleased you. If the food of our God did not cause us to find favor, we would then eat the food prepared the Babylonian way. The food of Marduk would have been proven superior to the food of our God, and you would have been honored. In this way, I have pleased both my God and my king. Daniel looked into Nebuchadnezzar's eyes. The king was only 7 years older than he. Daniel did not know what he would do. Ha ha! I like this one, Nebuchadnezzar shouted, a smile engulfing his face, looking at those around him. Other men are afraid to speak plainly to me. My wise men are more concerned about being patronizing than being wise. It is refreshing to find a man like this one, wise before he is old. Nebuchadnezzar turned his gaze back to Daniel. What is your name? Daniel, my king. Haman, Haman, from this day forward, he is to be an apprentice in your care. He shall enter into the service of my magi. I will have him as one of my wise men. Haman looked at Daniel and back at Nebuchadnezzar. It shall be as you command. He bowed quickly to hide his face, flushed with anger and embarrassment. A Hebrew elevated to the court of Babylon? Marduk forbid it. Back in 1978, I spent a semester studying in England at a place called Harlexton, formerly a British manor house built in 1850. It had been used as a convent, housed members of the Royal Air Force during World War II, had been owned by a wealthy cosmetic heiress before being bought by the University of Evansville in the early 1970s. While I was there, my parents came to visit, and so we took a weekend trip to London to visit the sites. While we were in London, my parents wanted to take me to a casino that they had read about. I was 21, so I was old enough. However, for some reason, I was filled with dread at the thought of going to the casino. I don't know why. I'm not against people gambling responsibly. I just felt that God was telling me, don't go. And so we ended up going to see a play. It was a comedy called No Sex Please, We're British. It made fun of British Victorian era morals and how the British are usually stuck up and also prim and proper. We had a great time. And through the years, I've remembered the time I spent in the mother country with fondness. 10 years later, in 1988, there was a referendum here in Indiana to repeal the state's constitutional ban on lotteries and other forms of gambling. The fear was that we wouldn't just stop at lottery tickets. We'd end up with horse track betting, casinos, and as the promise of the electronic cottage, now known as the internet, came true, we'd see all sorts of online betting. I joined a not for profit grassroots campaign called Indiana Citizens Against Legalized Gambling. I became the head coordinator for Marion County. That's the county in which Indianapolis, the state's capital city, is. While our side lost and all the fears of increased gambling came to pass, I learned a lot about grassroots political organizing. These were lessons that I applied in my role when I became the state director of the Indiana Christian Coalition 4 years later in 1992. I think back to that choice I made in London about putting my foot down and telling my parents I would not go to a casino. If I had done so, how could I have later fought against gambling 10 years later? Would I have taken a liking to gambling? Maybe so much that, like former Colts football quarterback by the name of Art Schlichter, gotten so caught up in gambling that I would be pulled into the illegal activities so often associated with organized crime. At the very least, would I have felt so morally compromised that I would have declined the chance to become the head of the Indiana Christian Coalition, or never even have been asked to do so in the first place? I'll never know. But in thinking about how Daniel must have felt when offered the chance to eat food that was forbidden by the dietary laws of his own religion, I can see where such a seemingly small thing could have snowballed into other things that would have prevented Daniel from becoming God's man in Babylon. Perhaps there's a lesson like that from your life that you can share with your grandkids. Pinocchio goes to Paradise Island with a boy named Lampwick at halfway through the movie. He didn't listen to his conscience, Jiminy Cricket, who had warned him of the dangers that he faced. Imagine Imagine that Lampwick had said to Pinocchio, "See, you should have let your conscience be your guide. Now you're going to turn into a donkey just like me." Well, that concludes this session for the Chronicles of Belteshazzar. But as we do so, I want to ask this question for reflection. What moral lessons can we teach our kids and grandkids by telling stories from our lives? Well, I hope that you've enjoyed this story of the Chronicles of Belteshazzar on my podcast, Discovering Truth at the Movies. If you sign up for it at wisejargon.com/at the movies, you'll be able to get my Conversations with the Culture monthly newsletter, as well as info on gaining access to anthologies of past issues. I'll also send you Discovering Godly Leadership at the Movies with my thanks for signing up.